So, how would you close a 500K opportunity? Let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Zen here with another episode of our sales training for beginners. This is the new edition. It is a place where LinkedIn professionals learn software sales while enjoying lunch. Today, we have Norbert Krasovickis. He's going to talk about how to be the first sales hire as an account executive at a hyper-growth startup. Also, he's going to talk about the 3 must-do items every day to be a successful AE, and most importantly, he's going to cover how to close a 500K deal. But first, let's say hi to our viewers. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Hello, everyone at LinkedIn. If you are new here and you'd like to get updated, you know what to do. Today, we have an enterprise account executive who's closed over $69,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And it's only October, folks. His quota is $4,500 in MRR every single month, which means he delivers 222% of his quota every single month. He helps his company grow by 2.5x year over year as an individual contributor. Please help me welcome the first sales hire at Lokalise.com, Norbert Krasovickis. Yay, welcome Norbert. How you doing?
Hello.
Good afternoon. What time is it there?
It's around 6 p.m. already for us. So yeah, we're a little bit ahead of you of the show. So if people are eating lunch, we're going to be eating dinner soon.
Yes, tell us where you're from.
So I'm from Riga, Latvia. I was born and raised here. It's a very small country in Northern Europe. Very few people know of it, but we do have actually one very famous asset, which is Kristaps Porzingis, basketball player. We're pretty much like very like we always promote him wherever we can, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So in terms of about myself, like I grew up in Riga, Latvia, but ever since I was like from a very like early age, I've been studying in international school. So my parents always thought that it was always going to be something that would benefit me in the future if I spoke more languages. So essentially, they sent me off to an American school when I was younger, and I started basically speaking. Well, English became my mother tongue, and then after a while, they realized that it would probably be better for me to study abroad as well, like in a completely unique environment where I wasn't being looked out for, and I was completely independent. So yeah, they sent me to a boarding school when I was 11 years old. Maybe it's because they loved me too much. Maybe it's because they didn't love me enough. You never know.
They definitely wanted to make sure that you were well cultured and you spoke a lot of languages. So how many languages do you speak?
I used to speak a lot more than I currently practice, but at one point I was fluent in French. I spoke English, Russian, and intermediate Spanish, and I could speak a little bit of German as well. But now that's like way in the long gone past. I haven't practiced French in like, I don't know, maybe 10 years already.
Wow, that's amazing. The Americans usually just speak one language. I'm from the Philippines, so I speak 2 languages. And then, we take our language classes in high school, not early age, not at 11 years old. So I think you have an advantage, a competitive advantage when it comes to sales, and you work at Lokalise. So tell us your journey, like, from boarding school and having these awesome experiences. How did you find out about Lokalise, and how did you become the first sales hire there?
Yeah, so I believe boarding school definitely helped shape a little bit like my career choice in itself, because when you're studying like with a large multitude of different kind of cultures and nationalities, you get to get a little bit of like insight as to how each of the cultures, like basically how do they go about their daily lives. Like some people provided context in terms of what do they actually prioritize. Like, would it be trust? Would it be reliability? Would it be flexibility? Would it be something like along those lines? And yeah, this definitely gave me a better idea as to how you could basically sell into different cultures as well. But I didn't really have the mindset of selling at the time. For me, it was always basically how could you solve a problem that one culture is having, for instance, with another one? Like how could you break down these like cultural barriers that you can essentially have? And at the time when I was out of university, I didn't really think that much in terms of my career. So I went and I ventured into something that is approachable for most, I believe, college graduates, which was working in a restaurant. So basically, that was kind of like my first encounter with sales in itself, because rather than trying to sell like a piece of software or anything along those lines, you're trying to sell like a Sunday special or an expensive bottle of wine. And at the same time, that kind of like already sets you up in terms of like negotiating, because you're always going to get a lot of pushback, right, from a potential customer. But at the same time, it kind of taught me how to like swing for the walls, because like you never know whether or not a person might say yes if they're in a good mood, if they're like in an anniversary or something along those lines. They want to celebrate, they want to make it a magical moment. And that's where basically you learn that, you know, you can always try to like pitch the moon and, you know, end up selling a star or something along those lines.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Wow. So poetic.
Yeah, I
So,
try.
tell us about this your flow. Like, I've been observing you as your colleague, and like from my point of view, you've been quite elusive. So I'm like, I want to know what Norbert does, because he's our number one sales rep here, and he definitely has a lot of secrets. So the first thing I'd like to learn is, what are the three must do activities, you know, as an enterprise account executive, that you have to do before you leave work? Because I know you work a lot, because I see you online like almost 24/7, and there's, you know, the sun never sets at Norbert's world. What does the three activities consist of in order to be a successful salesperson?
I would say one of the like the main aspects would be to have a very organized kind of like schedule calendar. So you basically each time slot during your day is accounted for, so you know exactly what you're meant to be focusing on at any given time within your day. And then secondly, like the reason why I try to like get always onboarded in terms of like the process in itself is I'm monitoring like what's happening inside of the company, like not only from a perspective of development, like what we're going to be rolling out in the coming months, or like what we should be learning about in the future, but also in terms of like the issues that we might have had, like what are some of the kind of like releases that we've made, what are some of the bug fixes that we've done as well. And that basically helps me get a better idea as to how the company itself is performing, so I can provide a more honest approach or a more honest kind of vision for a potential customer that may be interested in our solution. So like if they're asking us like, do you have any performance downtimes, you can actually like provide a bit of feedback as to, yes, if you did have it, but how quickly was it resolved? So at that same time, you can open up a conversation in terms of that we do have that reliability and that transparency in place as well. So that would definitely be one of the main things as well, like monitoring what's happening within the organization. And basically like if you ever like have any kind of like free time, or you're just browsing the internet, like seeing which potential services or like what you might be using can actually benefit from Lokalise in itself. Because one of the main things regarding our solution is that we're not, you know, like some software can be like very industry specific, like targeted towards that. Whereas the neat thing about like working in the translation or the localization space is that you're not like industry specific, you're pain specific. If you're experiencing a problem within the translation of some sort of product that you might have, that's definitely like, well, we can have a conversation. And even if you're not going to be a potential customer, just like having that conversation is always a good thing.
Mm. There's a lot that's been thrown here. I want to focus more on this industry specific versus pain specific. How do you find and how do you change a person's paradigm from thinking, okay, you know, we're a fintech company and we want things a certain way, to moving into this pain specific conversation?
Well, it's like I'm not sure which book this was written in, but there was basically the segment where the author basically covers the problem as kind of like a health issue. Like imagine that you had a problem, like it was just a minor headache or something along those lines, but it turned out to be, for instance, a tumor. And if you came up to a person and a doctor tells you that he can solve this pain for you for a pill that costs $1,000,000, you probably say no. But if he told you you can solve this pain for like $500, you probably jump at the opportunity. And this is pretty much the same thing. Like, are you experiencing that problem? If yes, how big is that problem, and how much are you actually willing to pay in order for that problem to go away? And that's essentially where you can navigate the conversation into, because I'm sure that companies, they don't want to focus on like just certain aspects like that are mundane, like for instance, just like copy pasting code and like trying to get into localizable format. You have better ways to spend your resources as well, and I'm sure they realize this as well, especially when you explain it like, hey, you guys are doing it this way right now. I'm sure it causes a headache, but you can do it this way, no headache whatsoever. And just getting them to that wow moment, that's basically where we strive.
Nice. I'm kind of going off our questionnaire here because of the things that you're dropping. And I really love this idea of asking the questions of, how big is that problem and how much are you willing to pay for that problem? Because you cover two criterias that are very important, which is budget requirement and then the incumbent pains, right? So how and who do you ask these questions to, and how do you work the stakeholders of an enterprise world? Because it's very different from transactional, where you're just working with one person making a decision. So walk us through that process.
Definitely. Like, since our solution itself, like we're localized, we're not targeted towards like one specific stakeholder. The neat thing about it is that we actually get to communicate with like a bunch of different like departments that may be involved in the decision-making process. So even prior to getting to the C-suite, and in order to get to convince them, you can actually, make your own kind of like first contacts that may be like, for instance, a developer or a product designer or a product owner, your own champion, that he will actually take that crusade internally and like basically over like convince his inner management that you don't even need to ask them these questions like, how much are you willing to pay? They're already going to be prepared to pay when they're already entering the conversation with you. So I think that would be like the main approach, is trying to get all these different departments to see the tech, like to basically play around with it, and basically go to that aha moment that they're like, oh, wow, we don't actually have to focus on this aspect anymore. This is going to be taken care of by this outsourced solution. Perfect. And that's basically where I think the success comes from.
Yes. I'm going to dig deeper into this one point of champion. How do you turn, let's say, a stranger who doesn't really know what Lokalise does? How do you turn that stranger into a champion?
I think the best approach, and like what's been working for me the most of the time, is just being super honest. Like, you're not trying to sell them on anything. You're trying to basically help them out. So I personally don't like the salesy approach where like you're just pitching like and like that's it. Like you're basically how would you call it? It's basically a shotgun approach where you're trying to basically just spray out and like pray that something sticks to the wall, right? Whereas if you're trying to be a consultant, you're actually listening to the person's problem and you're trying to basically say whether or not you can solve this or you can't solve it. Even if someone, for instance, a potential prospect or a potential customer, they're not actually going to like you might not be a good fit. If you can recommend an alternative service that or an alternative approach that would help them achieve the result, even if they don't work for that company in the future, they'll come back to you and they say, hey, you actually gave me some very solid advice that actually helped me out. Maybe we can work on this right now. Like, and it usually works that way as well.
I have to do a mic drop. That was awesome. Okay, so one more thing. Let's go back to the question around the sales process, because a lot of the times people will ghost. What do you do when a deal goes dark?
Well, that's actually a good question. Like, it can actually be pretty discouraging if someone like keeps on like not responding to you, and you keep on like writing, and you actually like put in like a lot of effort, because a lot of people assume that you're sending out mass emails, right? Whereas sometimes you just write each email individually, like trying to get some sort of response. What I usually do if I don't get a response is I try to reach them on different communication channels. So, for instance, if they don't respond to me by email, I try LinkedIn. If they don't respond to me on LinkedIn, I'll try their phone number. If they don't answer to the phone number, I'll try to get them on WhatsApp, Instagram, something along those lines. So even if I don't have a personal profile, I'll try reaching out to them like through either I have a girlfriend. I can try to reach out from her profile, and since she's quite attractive, I do actually get a lower success rate than that.
No way.
Sometimes I use, a fake phone number as well. Not a fake phone number, just a number that is not recognized by a potential customer, just to see like what the situation is. And I actually, like, I'm very honest about it. Like, the reason why I'm calling from like an unknown number is because I haven't been able to reach me, and I just want to be aligned on the same page. And most of them, they don't mind. They usually laugh about it as well. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem.
Okay, wait, what do you do with the LinkedIn? Like, is it a DM? Is it a post? Do you comment on there? Like, what is the
I first try to connect with them, and I have like a personal message that, like, I believe LinkedIn gives you 250 characters to write like some message. And I just basically try to like summarize like as to why I'm reaching out to them, and I hope they don't mind my direct approach. Whereas if they don't answer to a LinkedIn connection, then you can have Sales Navigator, I believe, and they give you like 80 message credits that you can basically send out to people that you're not connected with as well.
Nice. What about the Instagram outreach?
Instagram, I myself don't have an Instagram profile, but since my girlfriend does, I sometimes try to find people based on their Instagram profiles, like based on like either their name or like what the username might be, like in terms of like what they registered like within a company, for instance. And then I try to send them a message like from a direct profile. And since she's quite if it's a man, of course, like since she's quite attractive, they usually respond. I'm like, hey, this is actually Norbert from Lokalise, and they feel like they've been catfished. But sometimes it helps.
Hilarious.
That's a fun story to tell.
Try that. I've never tried that before. That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go to the next question here. What do you do, or how do you overcome a pricing objection?
Well, this is a part of the qualification process as well. Like, you'd have to try to qualify it in the very beginning if a potential customer does have a budget in place. But in terms of if you like face it at like towards the very end of the closing cycle in itself, you have to contextualize where the pricing itself is coming from and what is the reason behind that pricing as well. Because I'm sure that most potential customers and most businesses, they understand that you are also a business, you're also making some sort of service, and that there's certain costs that are implied already, and like this is also for your own future growth and future development. So usually you try to pinpoint where the issue with the pricing comes from, if there's anything that you can do from your side in order to help resolve that problem as well. Like, for instance, some companies that have a budget that's only targeted towards one department, whereas if you try to encompass like 2 or 3 more departments together in that same initiative, you actually have a much larger budget in place, and they're actually able to move forward with your solution. So I believe these are kind of like the things you need to look out for as well, because objections, they don't usually come from one place. They usually come from a wider set of problems. So you need to basically understand why they're trying to say no to you. What is the reason behind that?
Give us some examples and questions that you would use in order to uncover those.
If, for instance, someone says, no, it's too expensive, I would ask, why would they be exploring our solution in the first place if they find that it's too expensive to solve their needs at this time? And then that would open up some leeway into the conversation as to what they were expecting to spend to solve these kind of problems. And then if you uncover more problems that your solution is able to address, or that's a particular like pricing or the subscription tier is able to address for them, then of course, like for instance, a lot of people, they have issues with implementation. So for instance, if you realize that, they don't have the dedicated resources to help implement this in the very beginning, you can actually tell them like, hey, like if you go for this subscription tier, you can actually get implementation support in place, and you can actually hit the ground running in a matter of like days rather than months or years. And they're usually pretty well, it's usually pretty well received.
Yeah, I wish I could break this down a little more, because it's so smooth how you change people's paradigm through questions. You literally went from a pricing objection to uncovering whether they have some implementation issues. And I do agree with you. Most of the time when they say give a pricing objection, it's something else. It's usually something else.
Yeah, the whole point of the questions is that you're trying to get them to the point where they're basically telling you what they need, essentially. So you're kind of playing chess with them as well. Like, you're not actually the enemy. You're just basically like a ping pong wall, and they're just, volleying questions off of you, objections. And then afterwards, they eventually come to their own like reasoning as to why they should be moving forward with it as well.
Wow, I like that metaphor a lot. That's a new one. Okay, so then let's talk about this deal, this
Yeah.
500K deal that was closed, I think, a couple months ago. Walk us through the process. Like, how did you get the deal? Was it an inbound? Was it outbound? And then, like, just walk us through every single stage and what happened. What did you do? How did you build such amazing trust from that brand?
So, I mean, the first time that came, like, this is a very like long, long deal in itself. Like the first time that they actually came in was through an inbound channel. I believe they reached out to a support team, and then afterwards, like they were just researching tools available on the market. And after a while, they basically just they said that, hey, like we're willing to give your solution a go. And what actually kind of cinched it for us as well is that one of their translation partners that they were working with was already actually using our solution for another customer that they had as well. And they actually helped us get on a call with them to walk them through how we could potentially help them. And at the time, we were also developing some new features as well, like the Figma plugin, for instance, and the Sketch plugin, which is basically putting like the whole localization paradigm like on its head, because you can actually start the process from the design stage rather than waiting for a development team to come in and actually provide you with the content for translation. And they actually really like that. They like the idea that we could help streamline the process for them. But the objections naturally were that we were like a very young company in itself. We weren't at that place yet where they would be able to entrust us with like a with their localization materials, because it's a very it's kind of like a legacy company, especially in the US. Like they're huge. And yeah, like I mean, it took I believe like a year and a half. They evaluated from both sides of the pond. It was from the UK, from the US. They had a lot of different stakeholders, developers. We had to go through a lot of security kind of hurdles as well. But what I have to note as well is that this wasn't like kind of a process just like from a sales perspective. Like I, as a salesperson, did all I could, but if our management and our leadership didn't support this in the first place, I would never have gone done. So I can't say that I can't take credit for like for bringing this in, because we as a company as a whole kind of like all jumped into to try to close this off as well.
I love the teaming mentality. I love how you were able to incorporate, well, at the beginning, the partners, and then the whole process with building Figma, like throughout their evaluation process. So it sounds like even before you initiated this conversation with the partners, they were already vetting a TMS, like maybe last year or so. What was that?
They were on the search for like they were evaluating, I think, 3 or 4 different like providers at the same time. And like they were usually the usual suspects. And we were hearing like a lot of like different feedback as well. Like someone really liked our solution, someone had like a few issues with it, someone just absolutely hated it, like because for instance a translator is not always going to see the same value as for instance a designer would, right? So we were basically trying to get the appropriate people on our side. And yeah, like the solutions architects, the ones that are actually going to be implementing this and kicking it off, they basically said that like we were the easiest tool to work with. And yeah, like that basically gave us that confidence that we needed to start actually pushing it through. But in terms of like the negotiation process in itself as well, this is actually where swinging for defenses makes sense, because we basically started off like with a very, very, very like large number. And then that gave us the leeway to try to negotiate it down to something that was approachable for both sides. So yeah.
Walk us through that. Wait, hold on. That is an amazing tip. So during the negotiation process, so now we're moving from qualification all the way to, we're skipping evaluation because there's a lot of ping ponging back and forth, overcoming objections, if you will, and trying to get a bunch of stakeholders to a focal point, because everyone had different whys, right? Reasons why they would hop on a call with you. Now we're moving into the negotiation stage. What, like, how did you know what to recommend at which price point, and why did you start high? Like, what was your psychology with this whole negotiation section?
To be completely frank, like we had no idea like what to offer. So like the whole negotiation process started as a request for a proposal, right? And after a while, they basically like they requested a proposal for 1 year. And we're like, okay, like let's try to like give them something amenable. Then after a while, their team came back and they're like, actually, all of the offers that we received were like really, really expensive. So we're trying to see what we can do with a multi-year agreement. And then that's where I thought like, okay, let's try to do something tricky. So we started doing the initial kind of contract value completely by the book, and actually maybe even like a little bit higher than it should have been. But then afterwards, we basically said that for every year that they committed to our platform, we'd be willing to give a fixed rate of a discount. And essentially that basically helps cinch it off. So essentially they were more interested in terms of committing for a longer relationship and not going through this whole process again, while at the same time ensuring a lower kind of like price per year afterwards. So I think that we kind of got the best of both worlds in that sense.
Norbert, it actually sounds like they were already sold, like because in the evaluation process, if that's what happened during the negotiation.
Definitely. Like, I mean, because with high enterprises, it's always like 50-50. You might think that you have it kind of like closed off during the evaluation process, everyone is sold, but then it goes to the C level. And then once it goes to the C level, they have like a different approval process in place. They need to sign it off. They need like 5 board members' signatures to be able to get on this. So yeah, like that was a scary point for me, that like, yes, they accepted the offer, but like, are we actually going to get it across? And if it wasn't for like our founders, like I don't think we would have actually come to an agreement until they're like basically willing to say like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, how long did the negotiation stage take place compared to prospecting and the evaluation, you think?
The evaluation itself, it took a year, and then like the actual like signing off of the agreements and everything like that, like the back and forth was, I believe, approximately 5 months.
Wow. Yeah, that makes total sense. And during the evaluation, did you always have the same stakeholders, or did you have people like drop off and then you
that's
had
the
to start
thing.
all over?
Because large enterprises, like at the same, like, because you need to be able to, they expect you to pander to them, because you know they're a huge company that can basically make or break you, right? But yeah, like they had a lot of different divisions actually testing, and like as I mentioned, like they actually had 2 teams, like one from the US, one from the UK. They were evaluating the tools, so you have to actually try to manage both time zones. You have to make yourself available during the evenings as well to make sure that their team that was, you know, currently using the solution had that kind of I don't know. They basically felt that they were getting that level of support where they felt confident that they could move forward with your platform. Because even though the evaluation started from the European team, the decision still had to be made by the US team as well. Like they're the ones that actually signed off on the entire agreement.
So in a way, you had to close 2 deals to get this one deal. Yeah.
Yeah, like to an extent that could be considered. But then again, there's like some enterprises that are just overtly bureaucratic as well, and you'll like no matter how hard you want to close them, and no matter like how willing you are to like move forward with them, they still won't be able to do that because they're just too bureaucratic in that sense as well. Like they have their own kind. They have their own kind of like sets of guides that they need to follow by, and if you don't fall within that template, then that's it. Like there's no room for flexibility. That was the case actually in the old company that I worked with. They couldn't close like some of like the bigger deals, like for instance Nike. Like Nike had their own kind of like terms that you need to abide by. Otherwise, they wouldn't just work with you. That's it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That brings me to another question, again, out of scope from our questions here. So let's say you had legal saying no, right, to a term, or finance. How are you able to like align your finance decision makers with your champions who are just a developer or designer, for instance? What are some of the tips there?
I mean, what we did was we kind of like communicated informally. So we had like telephone calls just to understand, like to keep the pulse, like what's happening. And basically, yeah, they kind of like provided us like some feedback in terms of what we should be doing. And we kind of shared some feedback as like where we are not able to compromise at all. And yeah, like through the kind of like these kind of informal conversations that we had that were completely off the book, it helped us basically come to like some sort of agreement, like from both sides. So we were trying to like pitch this internally, like, hey, like if we really want this, then it has to happen this way. And at the same time, we're saying like, hey guys, like we understand that like we need to do this, but at the same time, like if we want to move forward and not waste another year like researching for a new tool, we'll need to basically compromise on something like on our side as well.
There you go. And that's with the developers and designers, right? You're trying to get the business side to essentially talk to the finance team, like this is what needs to happen in order to move forward and not wait another year.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. There you go, using time and building rapport as a way to get your champion to internally get the green light for you. That's a very huge sales tip. So we're coming close to our end here. Tell our audience where to find you.
So anyone can find me on LinkedIn, to be honest. I don't really have like other social media platforms for some reason. Like I don't know, like at one point I was really like into Facebook and Instagram, but after a while, like it just kind of like became too overwhelming for me. It was like a very politicized kind of place. So I just kind of stepped back from it. And, like LinkedIn is becoming more or less like the new Facebook, in my opinion. You have a lot of like different stories that you can actually look at. So yeah, like I mean, I'm usually there. So if anyone needs any advice or has any questions, I'll be happy to connect.
And don't forget to check out localize.com as well. Okay, localize.com with a K. So, Norbert, my last question is, how does Norbert close deals?
Well, one of the first things, as I mentioned, is that basically never be scared to like swing for the fences in a sense, because like you can always come down from a higher price point in itself. That'd be the first thing that I would recommend. Is basically, no one actually ever told me this. Everyone like told me like sell by the kind of like the price list in itself, or the list price. But in general, like you can always try to like make something more expensive. Like, the whole point of like enterprise pricing is that they don't actually understand what they don't actually know what the price will be. So you can always try to get it a bit higher. Then the second thing that I would always recommend is basically try to contextualize your stakeholders, or the person that you're selling to, their problems in itself. So try to explore marketing, try to explore product, try to explore sales in themselves, developers, any kind of information that you like. It's just simple reading, simple research, even elementary coding lessons as well. They can definitely help make that difference, because you're able to build rapport much quicker. And at the same time, you're able to step into someone else's shoes to understand how you're actually able to help address their issues that they may be facing.
Awesome. And what's the third one?
Always have a smile.
Yeah, definitely. There you have it. So, all right. So to recap, that was swing for the fences, go for the gold, go for the home run. And then the second tip was to explore each stakeholders, learn as much as you can by building rapport, step in their shoes, address their issues, and most importantly, always have a smile. Control your mentality, control the controllables. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Norbert. I'm so grateful
Thank you
for
for
you. I
having me.
learned a lot today. Thank you. Until
Glad
next
to.
time, everybody.
Bye bye.
Peace.
It was a pleasure.
Bye.